Hello Kaplu, welcome my knowledgeable class.
Thank you, Emma.
Kaplu, what is our question today?
Today, Emma. Animation topics to be discussed. Brief knowledge of animation.
Animation, the art of making inanimate objects appear to move. Animation is an artistic impulse that long predates the movies. History's first recorded animator is Pygmalion of Greek and Roman mythology, a sculptor who created a figure of a woman so perfect that he fell in love with her and begged Venus to bring her to life. Some of the same sense of magic, mystery, and transgression still adheres to contemporary film animation, which has made it a primary vehicle for exploring the overwhelming, often bewildering emotions of childhood, feelings once dealt with by folktale.
Emma knowledge gave me to the animation history.
Okay Kaplu.
History of animation.
History animation. Very interesting history of animation. The theory of the animated cartoon preceded the invention of the cinema by half a century. Early experimenters, working to create conversation pieces for Victorian parlors or new sensations for the touring magic lantern shows, which were a popular form of entertainment, discovered the principle of persistence of vision. If drawings of the stages of an action were shown in fast succession, the human eye would perceive them as a continuous movement. One of the first commercially successful devices, invented by the Belgian Joseph Plateau in 1832, was the phenakistoscope, a spinning cardboard disc that created the illusion of movement when viewed in a mirror. In 1834, William George Horner invented the zoetrope, a rotating drum lined by a band of pictures that could be changed. The Frenchman Émile Reynaud in 1876 adapted the principle into a form that could be projected before a theatrical audience. Reynaud became not only animation's first entrepreneur but, with his gorgeously hand-painted ribbons of celluloid conveyed by a system of mirrors to a theater screen, the first artist to give personality and warmth to his animated characters. France. Émile Cole was developing a form of animation similar to Blackton's, though Cole used relatively crude stick figures rather than Blackton's ambitious newspaper-style cartoons. Coinciding with the rise in popularity of the Sunday comic sections of the new tabloid newspapers, the nascent animation industry recruited the talents of many of the best-known artists, including Rube Goldberg, Bud Fisher, creator of Mutt and Jeff, and George Harriman, creator of Crazy Cat, but most soon tired of the fatiguing animation process and left the actual production work to others.
Okay, fine. And Walt Disney about history.
This lesson did not go unremarked by the young Walt Disney, then working at his Laugh-O-Gram Films studio in Kansas City, Missouri. His first major character, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, was a straightforward appropriation of Felix. When he lost the rights to the character in a dispute with his distributor, Disney simply modified Oswald's ears and produced Mickey Mouse. Far more revolutionary was Disney's decision to create a cartoon with the novelty of synchronized sound. Steamboat Willie, 1928, Mickey's third film, took the country by storm. A missing element, sound, had been added to animation, making the illusion of life that much more complete, that much more magical. Later, Disney would add carefully synchronized music, The Skeleton Dance, 1929, three-strip Technicolor, Flowers and Trees, 1932, and the illusion of depth with his multiplane camera, The Old Mill, 1937. With each step, Disney seemed to come closer to a perfect naturalism, a painterly realism that suggested academic paintings of the 19th century. Disney's resident technical wizard was Ub Works, a childhood friend who followed Disney to Hollywood and was instrumental in the creation of the multiplane camera and the synchronization techniques that made the Mickey Mouse cartoons and the Silly Symphonies series seem so robust and fully dimensional. For Disney, the final step was, of course, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, 1937. Although not the first animated feature, it was the first to use up to the minute techniques and the first to receive a wide, Hollywood-style release. Instead of amusing his audience with talking mice and singing cows, Disney was determined to give them as profound a dramatic experience as the medium would allow. He reached into his own troubled childhood to interpret this rich fable of parental abandonment, sibling rivalry, and the onrush of adult passion. With his increasing insistence on photographic realism in films such as Pinocchio 1940, Fantasia 1940, Dumbo 1941, and Bambi 1942, Disney perversely seemed to be trying to put himself out of business by imitating life too well. That was not the temptation followed by Disney's chief rivals in the 1930s, all of whom came to specialize in their own kind of stylized mayhem.
Fleischer Brothers about history, tell me.
OK, Max and Dave Fleischer had become successful New York animators while Disney was still living in Kansas City, Missouri. The Fleischers invented the rotoscoping process, still in use today, in which a strip of live-action footage can be traced and redrawn as a cartoon. The Fleischers exploited this technique in their pioneering series Out of the Inkwell 1919-29. It was this series, with its lively interaction between human and drawn figures, that Disney struggled to imitate with his early Alice cartoons. But if Disney was Mother Goose and Norman Rockwell, the Fleischers, Max produced, Dave directed, were Stride Piano and Red Whiskey. Their extremely urban, overcrowded, sexually suggestive, and frequently nightmarish work, featuring the curvaceous torch singer Betty Boop and her two oddly infantile colleagues, Bimbo the dog and Coco the clown, charts a twisty route through the American subconscious of the 1920s and single-quote 30s, before collapsing into Disney-esque cuteness with the features Gulliver's Travels 1939 and Mr. Bug Goes to Town 1941, also releases Hoppity Goes to Town. The studio's mainstay remained the relatively impersonal Popeye series, based on the comic strip created by L.Z. Seeger. The spinach-loving sailor was introduced as a supporting player in the Betty Boop cartoon Popeye the Sailor 1933 and quickly ascended to stardom, surviving through 105 episodes until the 1942 short Baby Wants a Bottle Ship, when the Fleischer studio collapsed and rights to the character passed to Famous Studios.
History of Termite Terrors.
Less edgy than the Fleischers, but every bit as anarchic were the animations produced by the Warner Brothers cartoon studio, known to its residents as Termite Terrace. The studio was founded by three Disney veterans, Rudolph Ising, Hugh Harman, and Fries Ferling, but didn't discover its identity until Tex Avery, fleeing the Walter Lantz studio at Universal, joined the team as a director. Avery was young and irreverent, and he quickly recognized the talent of staff artists such as Chuck Jones, Bob Clampett, and Bob Cannon. Together they brought a new kind of speed and snappiness to the Warner's product, beginning with Gold Diggers of single-quote 49, 1936. With the addition of director Frank Tashlin, musical director Carl W. Stalling, and voice interpreter Mel Blanc, the team was in place to create a new kind of cartoon character, cynical, wisecracking, and often violent, who, refined through a series of cartoons, finally emerged as Bugs Bunny in Tex Avery's A Wild Hare 1940. Other characters, some invented and some reinterpreted, arrived, including Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, Tweety and Sylvester, Pepe Le Pew, Foghorn Leghorn, Roadrunner, and Wile E. Coyote. Avery left Warner Brothers and in 1942 joined Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer's moribund animation unit, where, if anything, his work became even wilder in films such as Red Hot Riding Hood 1943 and Bad Luck Blackie
Animation in Europe.
1949.
History of animation.
Europe animation had meanwhile taken a strikingly different direction. Eschewing animated line drawings, filmmakers experimented with widely different techniques, in Russia and later in France. Ladislaw Starowicz, also billed as Ladislaw Starowicz, a Polish art student and amateur entomologist, created stop-motion animation with bugs and dolls. Among his most celebrated films are The Cameraman's Revenge, 1912, in which a camera-wielding grasshopper uses the tools of his trade to humiliate his unfaithful wife, and the feature-length The Tale of the Fox, 1930, based on German folk tales as retold by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. A Russian working in France, Alexander Alaziev, developed the pin screen, a board perforated by some 500,000 pins that could be raised or lowered, which created patterns of light and shadow that gave the effect of an animated steel engraving. It took Alaziev 2 years to create A Night on Bald Mountain, 1933, which used the music of Modest Mussorgsky. In 1963, Nikolai Gogol was the source of his most widely celebrated film, The Dark Fable The Nose. Inspired by the shadow puppet theater of Thailand, Germany's Lotte Reiniger employed animated silhouettes to create elaborately detailed scenes derived from folk tales and children's books. The Adventures of Prince Ahmed, 1926, may have been the first animated feature. It required more than 2 years of patient work and earned her the nickname the Mistress of Shadows, as bestowed on her by Jean Renoir. Her other works include Dr. Dolittle and His Animals, 1928, and shorts based on musical themes by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, Papageno, 1935. Adapted from The Magic Flute, Gaetano Donizetti, L'Elixir d'Amour, 1939. The Elixir of Love, and Igor Stravinsky, Dream Circus, 1939. Adapted from Pulcinella. In the 1950s, Reiniger moved to England, where she continued to produce films until her retirement in the '70s.
History of non-traditional forms.
Eastern Europe also became the center of puppet animation, largely because of the sweetly engaging, folkloric work of Jiri Trudka. Based on a Hans Christian Andersen story, Trudka's The Emperor's Nightingale became an international success when it was fitted with narration by Boris Karloff and released in 1948. His subsequent work included ambitious adaptations of The Good Soldier Schweik, 1954, and A Midsummer Night's Dream, 1959. Born in Hungary, George Pal worked as an animator in Berlin, Prague, Paris, and the Netherlands before immigrating to the United States in 1939. There he contracted with Paramount Pictures to produce the Puppetoons series, perhaps the most popular and accomplished puppet animations to be created in the United States. A dedicated craftsman, Pal would produce up to 9,000 model figures for films such as Tulips Shall Grow, his 1942 and Enoch's Allegory. Pal abandoned animation for feature film production in 1947, though in films such as The War of the Worlds, 1953, he continued to incorporate elaborate animated special effects sequences.
History of contemporary developments.
Century after Hood's birth, animation continues to evolve. The most exciting developments are found on two distinct fronts: the anime animation of Japan and the prime-time television cartoons of the United States. An offspring of the dense, novelistic style of Japanese manga comic books and the cut-rate techniques developed for television production in 1960, anime such as Miyazaki Hayau's Princess Mononoke, 1997, are the modern equivalent of the epic folk adventures once filmed by Mizoguchi Kenji, The 47 Ronin, 1941, and Kurosawa Akira Yojimbo, 1961. The Bodyguard. Kon Satoshi's Perfect Blue, 1997, suggests the early Japanese new wave films of director Oshima Nagisa with its violent exploration of a media-damaged personality. U.S. television animation, pioneered in the 1950s by William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, Yogi Bear, The Flintstones, was for years synonymous with primitive techniques and careless writing. But with the debut of The Simpsons in 1989, TV animation became home to a kind of mordant social commentary or outright absurdism, John Crick fallacies, Ren and Stimpy, that was too pointedly aggressive for live-action realism.
Dancing mood.
Okay. Next part coming soon.